Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today, his Moviness Lee Suchek is currently unavailable. I believe he is on a crusade preaching a campaign against horrible movies, something which I'm fully supportive of. But we do have a guest today, and he is the first guest on our podcast. Brady, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. I will say this. Yesterday, I was sick as a dog. I was sneezing. I could barely keep my eyes open.
Mm,
And and the good news is that I work from home. So from 7 to 3, I was pretty much in agony. And as soon as I clocked out, I popped a Benadryl and just laid out until 8 o'clock at night. So that
nice.
it was a beautiful thing. So how's your week been going so far?
It's going all right, dude. I was actually, well, no, I wasn't sick. You said that and it made me think of this because I feel like my voice is gonna get more and more hoarse as we talk.
That's going
Um,
around. Holy
well,
shit.
here's the thing though. I wasn't sick. I got choked and I do jujitsu, so I got
Okay.
choked out in like a really bad way, and my trachea is just still recovering. So my voice just gets super like raspy and crackly really fast. So we'll see what that's like. But I wasn't sick. I just got choked by someone who was better than me.
Well, what I was gonna say, back in college, I actually took a Taekwondo class, and I ended up going to green belt, and
Nice.
I would have gone further, but it was only 1 credit hour, and I was trying to fill up as many credit hours as I could, and I was like, do I choose Taekwondo or do I choose this religion class? I gotta take a religion class to meet my hours.
Yeah.
Um, so, like I said, I mean, you had the distinctive honor of being the very first guest
I
on our
know.
podcast.
That's
So that,
cool, dude.
yeah, so that is an honor you can carry with you, to the end of your days. But
Good.
I want to go ahead and just, I just want to keep the conversation organic. So, so I do have a few questions that can sort of guide the conversation. But before we dive into that, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Brady Jacquin. I am right now. I'm kind of a somewhat full-time director, filmmaker, call it what you will, or writer, director. Um, I'm living in Charlotte, North Carolina right now, and I'm just trying to make as many projects with talented people as I can, as well as trying to get a few of my own features up and running. I've done one feature here in Charlotte, and then I've got another feature slated for next summer, 2024. That's going to be shooting in Texas. So a lot of cool projects, and yeah, I'm just trying to make and write as many emotionally impactful things as I can with as many talented people as I can right now.
Excellent. Now, are you showcasing your films here in Charlotte, or are you like going region or nationwide?
So the feature that I shot in Charlotte is still in post production. So that's just kind of still in that stage of getting cut and all that kind of stuff. Um, and then obviously, yeah, the next feature I haven't even started on. We're in pre-production for that one. So in between those big features, there's a lot of different short films, and those are going around to different film festivals. So it kind of depends, how the film festival circuit is. So it's going to depend if I even get into certain ones. I have the Charlotte Film Festival is actually coming up here soon. So we'll
That's
see if
right.
we'll
That's
see if
right.
my film gets into that one. And then obviously there's a bunch of other ones like in Wilmington or LA that I've submitted to. So we'll cross our fingers and pray that we get into some of those.
Well, hopefully, hopefully this podcast, if we can get enough views on it, hopefully this will sway them
Dude,
into admitting.
hopefully, because the freaking the festival circuit is such a joke, man. It's so crazy. Like it's really cool when you get in a festival, and those festivals are awesome, but it's like submitting is the most heartbreaking thing because you submit to 20 festivals, you spend like over $1,000 submitting to them, and then whether or not you get in, it might be because your film isn't very good. That could happen, but also it could just be because maybe they had a 15-minute slot and your film was 20 minutes, or maybe it doesn't fit the vibe of the festival that they want. So it's like there's so many reasons it can't get in and maybe only one reason that it will get in. So it's just such a hard uphill battle.
Gotcha. So fun fact, I actually did volunteer with the Charlotte Film Festival several years back,
Oh, sweet.
back in the early 2010s. So I'm a little familiar with that.
Nice.
But for our viewers out there, can you walk us through the process of how you're submitting your films to these festivals? Because you mentioned that it's pretty difficult, and you also mentioned too you're shelling out quite a considerable amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, I go the traditional usually unless I kind of know somebody, which, more often than not, I don't know anybody. So I kind of go the Film Freeway route, which is just that obvious site that you can use. If you look up submitting to film festivals, it's going to be, one of the first things that pops up.
Hmm.
And then through that site, you can choose your region or choose a genre or whatever. You can really narrow down the kind of festivals that you want to submit to. But then, yeah, most of them do have submission fees that you have to pay. But it's nice that you can kind of search like that because if I had to give someone like the best tip for submitting your film, it's just do your homework on the festivals. Like you don't want to submit your horror, slasher flick to this like romantic comedy centered film festival because it's just not going to get in and you're going to waste your money. So
Right,
it's good to
right.
kind of do that research, see if they seem like the kind of festival that would like your film, and that way you don't just go and blow your money on a bunch of random choices.
So how do you know if your film has been accepted into the festival? Like, do they send you an email or what? Because I remember back in the day, and I'm probably dating myself here. I remember back in the day, people used to actually, mail, mail their films out to the festival organizers, and the festival organizers would either call or send them a letter saying, "Congratulations,
Mm.
your film has been accepted." What does that process look like?
Yeah, nowadays it's pretty much just either the festival themselves will email you and tell you yes or no, or Film Freeway itself has kind of a notification avenue that they can go down where they'll send you an email too, or usually you'll get both. Um, so yeah, it's pretty much all by email. There's really so far, at least in my experience, there's barely any feedback. It's just, hey, sorry, we couldn't choose your film, not like they don't tell you, hey, it's because the sound design wasn't good enough or it's because it just didn't work for us. They just kind of tell you yes or no. Though I have heard a bunch of stories of people kind of responding to those emails and just politely asking why and then maybe getting some feedback from that. But it's everything today, it's a little impersonal. It's kind of just like you either get the email or you don't, and that can be tough.
Right, right. So the film that you submitted, what was that about?
So the film right now that's kind of still in the festival run, and if I'm going to talk about what it's about, it probably shows why it wasn't selected. I bet, at least that's my theory. But it's basically it's like a horror drama, maybe thriller is a better word, but genres. Um, and it's about a man who's extremely suicidal and has these suicidal thoughts that manifest themselves in these two voices that we hear inside of his head, and they're kind of talking to him, um, basically being trying to even convince him to commit suicide or to go down that path. And we basically live in one night of this guy's life where he's kind of arguing with these voices. They're trying to convince him he's fighting the good fight, and it's a very dark and somber short film in that way.
Hmm.
So that might be like it's gotten rejected from a bunch of other ones, as is the usual thing with these things. But I wonder if the super dark subject matter is part of the reason why it hasn't gotten accepted into some of them.
There's a bit of a Hamlet quality to it if you think about it, because because he is struggling with himself, and honestly, since the pandemic, there have been a lot of issues with mental health. So, at least for me, I feel like that will be a pretty relevant film. You
Yeah,
know,
I was hoping when I made it that it would strike kind of at that because of everything that everyone's kind of gone through. There's been such a focus on people dealing with their own mental health and how that works and how difficult it really is. So I thought it would connect. Obviously, it can't go public yet because of the whole festival thing. It has to stay
yeah.
under wraps until so it can premiere at those festivals. But I hope that when it can be seen by a general broad audience, that it will be a little more impactful, because I can kind of understand why a festival director might be like, that's really gonna bring down the mood of the festival. Even if it's like a horror festival, it's not this short film is not like fun horror. You know what I mean? It's not like the
Yeah.
kind of horror where I jumped and now I'm laughing about it with my friends. It's like it ends and everyone just feels, at least I hope so, everyone kind of feels like very like, oh man, is that really what it's like? Like that sucks. And it's just kind of a downer. But I think that's what hopefully makes it powerful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when general audiences can see it, hopefully that'll really connect. Because I think a lot of people, they don't want to see a film that sugarcoats how difficult suicidal thoughts can be, and how it can be trying to fight them and feeling like you're arguing with yourself half the time and just trying to find a reason to stick around. And I
Yeah.
think that you don't want to feel like the filmmaker is like capitalizing on that but hasn't experienced it. So hopefully, because it really goes there, I think that'll actually make it more powerful for people.
And I was going to say and I was going to say this sounds like the kind of film that I would watch, because when I was in film school, I made a movie on 35 millimeter film called The Fifth Horseman.
Ah,
And it was basically about a guy who was being tormented by the fact that he murdered his wife after she cheated on him. And every time he would go to sleep, he would find himself in the woods, and he would see her standing there and blood would be coming out of her mouth. And it would
ah,
just drive him further and further into madness. And and I
interesting.
and I use the title The Fifth Horseman because, as we all know, from the Bible, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, but the fifth horseman is regret.
Yeah.
Or so I
That religion class is paying off for you.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I went to Catholic school, since kindergarten, so you
Nice.
had that stuff shoved down your throats, day after day. So, but but to get back to your point, I mean, it's subject material like that yes, it can be disturbing to those at the top, but it's very much relevant because it speaks to the times and it resonates with people. And I think it's a damn shame, really, with that some film festival organizers would think, this kind of hits too close to the heart, because it's something that everybody experiences.
Yeah, there's definitely a problem when I think there's a people say, "Oh, that's too true." Like you hit too close to what it actually is like. We want our movies to be a fun escape. And there's nothing wrong with a movie being a fun escape. That's great. Like movies should be an escape. But also I I think things are the most powerful when they feel honest, you know?
Right,
And
right.
that's not to say there's not like supernatural horror elements. There are in the short film that I made. Like it's not just this, psychological downer just showing a guy struggling with, like, there are also those horror elements that make it hopefully entertaining to watch. But I just never wanted to compromise on it feeling honest, like let's have those horror elements, let's shoot it well, let's do all those things that make it entertaining. But I never wanted to sacrifice the feeling of hopelessness and the feeling that feeling is never going to go away. I never wanted to sacrifice that for the sake of having it be a quote unquote more fun movie. But that was just, that's just me with this short film. If I make another one that's
Hmm.
different, I might be doing a horror film or a little short film here soon, and it might be a lot more lighthearted is the wrong term, but just a little more kind of fun, less pervasively depressing, I
A bit
guess.
more, a bit more optimistic, so to speak,
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
Gotcha. So I wanted to ask you. What genre do you feel most comfortable in, or I should phrase it, what sort of genre do you prefer to work in?
That's difficult because I think most of my favorite things, they do that great thing where they kind of, they walk a line between genres.
Hmm.
Um, so I struggle to say a genre, but I know that what I usually am drawn to is very dark, very somber, but emotionally impactful. So like it's focused on character and on the character's emotion kind of more than anything else.
So sort of like a
Um,
Nolan-esque kind of vibe. Would that be an accurate statement?
Possibly. I think Nolan does a good job with that, but I think he's also a director that really loves the plot and loves the story, and how the story takes place is kind of his vehicle for bringing the character's emotion into it, whereas other
Mhm.
directors might, the character's emotion is the forefront and then the plot is kind of brought through that. So it depends though, because Nolan has very emotional movies too. I mean, you look at something like
Yeah.
Interstellar and the whole movie is boiled down to a father-daughter relationship at the end of the day. But then you look at something like Tenet and it's basically just plot. It's like, this is the concept and that's what the movie's about. And there's a few emotional characters here and there, but it's clearly not the like focus of the movie. Of course, I love Nolan for that though. Like, it's great that we have someone like Nolan making movies, because then if you want a different thing, you can go to a different filmmaker, and that's why it's so cool that we can have like
Right.
someone like him and then someone like Denis Villeneuve making movies at the same time, and you get a completely different perspective on things.
So it sounds like from what you're telling me, you kind of like to have some sort of like a sort of like almost modern gothic atmosphere in your films, because everything's dark, everything's somber. There's a struggle within oneself. Would you say that? I mean, would you say that there's a lot of abstract concepts that you're trying to flesh out in these films?
Yeah, I think so. I think I have yet to do a very like allegorical kind of film so far. Everything has been pretty um concretely narrative based. But that being said, like, I approach features kind of the same way I do short films, where I think of, okay, what is this at its base core? What is the
Hmm.
emotion I want people to get from this? So for example, I've written a feature that I'm trying to get made, trying to like shop the script around. And essentially it's just about a man uh who's a recovering alcoholic who loses his fiance in a very, very um gruesome murder. And then it hopefully, if I did it right, it does this thing where he is kind of on this path of revenge, but really that's not what the story is, because you kind of learn that it's not really about revenge for him. It's just the only way that he can cope with her loss, because he doesn't have any other means to cope with it other than just being violent and hateful towards people. So
Right.
it's not really a revenge story. So that's what I mean. And like, that's a dark introverted theme, or introspective, I should say, theme of the movie.
Hmm.
But it comes through in a straight up narrative where he is actually going and taking action and hunting people down. But you can hopefully, if the movie is made right, while you're watching it, you can tell that you're like, this isn't for justice, this is not for some good cause, this is because he is completely entrenched in grief and will not let himself actually process it in the way he should. So I really like that kind of stuff.
Okay, gotcha. So it's him trying to find closure in his own perverted way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think that's what it is. I think we've all been in a situation where you've had something, maybe not as horrible as what happens in the movie, I hope, but something so terrible happens, and maybe the healthy way would be to sit down and feel it and maybe talk to someone about it. But we go and hit the bag, or we drive fast down the highway, or we do something else. That's all it is just putting off the inevitable, which is us having to deal with those emotions at some point. So I think
Right.
this just took that to kind of an extreme, where the man is both capable and willing to go and actually be very violent with these bad people that he thinks are responsible. But we still know at its core, he's just like, it's almost like he's a little boy and he's unable to process this loss that he's dealt with. And that's really the only thing that makes him feel even okay, if at least for like 5 minutes, is just wailing on some people that he thinks might have had something to do with it.
Right, right. I mean, and from the way you're describing it, it sounds like what you're trying to do is to have the audience experience some sort of catharsis, because and this is something that's been done for thousands and thousands of years, since the beginning of drama, with with Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. And I'm getting a little bit academic here, so bear with me.
Oh,
But
please.
but the very idea of pushing these stories to the very limits of having these characters behave in such a way is to kind of show the audience that this is the extreme. This is the downside of acting on your emotions, of not processing it in a way that's healthy.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's something. There's something to be said about that there, because it's very. Yeah, I think he's definitely not, at least the character in this story, like you can tell he's not doing the most healthy thing, but on the other hand, he's also not necessarily like wrong in who he's targeting and how he's dealing with that. So it's just kind of this, I hope to kind of let the audience decide and feel that of like, did he go too far, or is this a valid response to such a heinous crime that happened, and
Right.
should he even be the one trying to exert quote unquote justice on these people, or should it be, should he leave it to the authorities for them to do their jobs and take it out of his hands? But at the end of the day, like, those moral questions come second to us just realizing, like, man, this guy's hurting. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's what I want people to feel first, is just like, oh my gosh, he's in pain. And then they can wrestle with all those interesting questions that come from that situation. But I want those to be secondary to the emotion. I just want people to feel for him.
Uh, gotcha. So I do want to shift gears a little bit. So walk me through the process of how you develop your film project. So, so from developing the idea to writing the script to shopping it to getting it filmed. We've already touched on the film festival circuit, but walk me through that process and let me know and let the audience know how you, Brady, go about conceiving and creating a film.
So
I
do you
know
want me to,
I know it's a loaded question, but like I said, I mean, it's something I'm very curious to learn about from different
yeah,
filmmakers.
do you want me to short film or feature film? Because they're
Um,
slightly different. They're
Either
not
one's fine.
entirely different. I guess so. Like, when I do a short film, it's a lot more about, hey, what, because I think with a short film, a lot of the weaknesses of short films when done poorly is that they try to do too much, right? It's like a
Hmm.
10-minute film, and you're trying to get in these ideas. You're trying to get in 50 ideas into one 10-minute short film, and then it's just none of them really work. So what I do with a short film is I just go, okay, what's the one emotion that I want people to feel when they watch this? What's the one emotion that I want them to get from this? Once I know that, then I would have had an idea that made me even think of that. Then I'll start fleshing out that idea, possibly writing a script. There's a lot of times I don't even write a script though for a short, depending on the short film. Just because a lot of the times it ends up just being wasted time. Like, if I'm going to send it to a bunch of actors to have them read for it, and I need to involve a lot of people, then it's helpful for me to write a script for something that's only like 7 pages. But
Right.
if it's just like me and my friends, and we're going to try to do something really easy in my house, then sometimes it's not worth it to do that. So I'll just kind of say, hey guys, this is the general idea. We need to start here. We need to end here. All right. And then I'll go through after that. And usually what I like to do is storyboard everything. I like to know exactly what shots I'm going to go to at exactly what time. I storyboard really, really meticulously, and a lot of that's for my own anxiety, so that on the day I know exactly what I'm doing.
Right.
Um, and it also frees me up to improvise. Like, I think if I actually have a really stringent plan, weirdly enough, it makes me feel freer on the day to be like, hey, that tree is doing an interesting thing. Why don't we put the camera over there and try see what that's like? Because I know that I have this like safety net to fall back on.
Yeah.
If I just went into it improvising, I'd probably just, I don't know. I haven't really done that because I feel like I wouldn't be thinking about the emotion of the scene. I'd be thinking about, oh crap, how am I going to shoot this? What am I going to do? Oh no. And then I'm not in it anymore. I'm panicking. Um, when it comes to a feature, it's similar. The feature I did in Charlotte, me and the DP got together. Um, I want to say, months before we started shooting, and went through the entire script. and storyboarded almost the entire thing. There were definitely sequences that we were a little more broad on because we didn't want to sit there and get every single shot for a diner shot reverse shot scene. We just didn't feel like we needed that. But then there's like a 8-minute long uncut sequence, and we really needed to know exactly where we were going to put the camera during that sequence so that it wouldn't feel lazy. Just like hey, we're not cutting, so that's cool. Like we wanted it to actually feel intentional.
Right.
So we did that, and then table reads were really important. I don't generally do table reads for short films, unless it's really, really dialogue heavy. But for this feature, I was able to get in a hotel with the 2 lead actors of this feature film and go through every scene that they had together. And that was really, really great. That was super exciting. And without doing that, I don't think we would have even gotten close to getting what we got on the day, because they, just little notes and just feeling out actors' instincts you can do in a table read. And you don't want to have to be doing that for the first time when you're worried about the camera and sound and all the other stuff that happens. So I like getting that done. Um, that's probably the main thing that I do in the process that I don't do during a short film.
Gotcha. So for the script writing process, are you writing by yourself or do you work with someone else?
I write by myself.
You do?
But
Okay.
I will have kind of a writer's room with kind of people that I trust to write with. Excuse me. But only about the ideas and where the story goes. Never actually sitting there and writing it with people. Like I
Right.
don't I for some reason I don't really play well with others when it comes to actually sitting down and writing it. I feel like I need to have my own, like as far as like she says this to this character and this is what the line needs to be and she needs to look here and all that needs to come, at least so far, just from me. But I like to get in a room with other people just to say, okay guys, so how are we going to have this character have this arc? Like the broader ideas I'll get with people that I trust on, but
Mhm.
then the nitty gritty, it so far at least, it has to be just me.
Yeah, because of just because I'm the same way. I feel like I write better alone because because your flow's not interrupted when you're working with someone else. You can just go from beginning to end and it feels right.
Yeah,
So I totally understand where you're coming from on that.
I think also I think I'm just emotionally immature in the sense that it's hard to write an extremely vulnerable scene with your buddy sitting right there,
Yeah,
like I,
exactly.
I feel like it's easier for me to be vulnerable when I'm just by myself and I'm putting it on the page. And then I have no problem with people reading it and knowing that I wrote it and being vulnerable in that way. But I don't know, like it'll feel less honest. If I've got someone looking over my shoulder, I feel like I won't make the choices that I need to make.
It's kind of like it's kind of like when when someone puts the spotlight on you and they expect you to perform and you freeze up. That's
Yeah.
what kind of makes me think of when you say that.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to move on to casting. Like, how do you normally go about casting for actors? Like, how does that work?
Casting's probably maybe the most important part for me. And there's a lot of different ways. Generally, and I mean a lot of filmmakers work this way probably for a reason. If I've worked with someone before and they're great, then I want any excuse to work with them again because we have a shorthand language now. We
Yeah,
maybe have we have a similar way of looking at things and way of looking at the script itself. So that's always great. If I can't do that, then generally right now I just kind of have to reach out and get anyone I know, but also maybe posting on whether it's Facebook or something else and trying to just get people to send me it or to see if they're interested. And then I usually don't think it hurts anybody to have them just do a read, even if like I don't know, like I don't think anyone's going to steal my script ideas or anything, so I'll just send it to them and I'll let them do a read. Like usually might be a self tape. Sometimes I'll hop on a Zoom with them, or we'll meet up and do a read because I have yet to not be able to tell everything I need to see in a read because like you can tell within 20 seconds if someone has the instincts that you're looking for.
yeah.
That sounds a little judgmental, but that's kind of just the way it is. I can tell very quickly if I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work. Because it's just like there are people who they might even be very talented, but you can tell that you would have to do so much work to get on the same page that it's not worth it. You know what I mean? Like you just you're so far apart in where the character needs to be that it's not worth the effort of trying to do that when someone else is a lot closer,
Mhm.
unless there's some other factors there.
Yeah, because there needs to be a sort of trust factor between the two of you. You know, they trust you as a director, and you need to trust them as an actor to deliver on what you're making.
Yeah, trust is the most important thing. They have to, and that's at this level too, when you're not making, $20 million professional like movies that everyone kind of assumes it's gonna be at least competent. Um, that's a big part that I try to assure my actors in. When they come in, I make sure that they can watch past stuff that I've done. I make sure that they can see that, so because then they're like there's this thing when you're at this level of like, hey, are we gonna make a real movie or are we gonna, you know that thing where it's like, are we about to make something bad? Like, do you actually know what you're doing? So I try to let my actors know very upfront that I'm committed to it, like that we're not going to shoot half the film and then I'm going to give up and they're not going to have anything that they can use for their reels.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way, I think, in having actors show up and feel like, hey, this guy cares and he cares about what I'm bringing to the role, and um he's not going to not give 110%. So I think as long as they know that I'm giving everything I have of myself, I think people are a lot more likely to give all that they have as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, so what about crew? How do you go about getting the crew for your films?
Crew is kind of the same in terms of if I've worked with people before and they did a great job, then I want to bring them back. If I'm able to. So just because again, trust is such a big deal. Even something as simple as a sound guy. It's like you can work with some sound guys and then you get the clips back and you're like, oh no, that sounds terrible. And he said it was all good. Oh no. So it's very, once you get someone who's really on the ball, it's like I don't want to let him go. I'll work with that person, for every single film. So it's usually the same thing. Although I try to keep my crews as small as possible, because there's also kind of a weird thing at this level where people they've seen behind the scenes of like the Avengers or something, and they have like a thing in their head that's like, I need to have 20 people on set. Like it that's just the way movies are made. You have a grip and you have a gaffer and you got a DP and you got his AC. And I kind of don't subscribe to that. I think it too many cooks in the kitchen. It usually just makes things a lot harder. I'd rather have, me, a DP, the AC, a sound guy, maybe a grip or a gaffer, but just like keep it intimate. Like I want everyone to know everybody. I want it to be a very relaxed environment so that people don't feel more pressure than they need to feel. Um, so I try to kind of keep it small where I can. I mean, we did the Charlotte 48-hour festival, and we could have worked with a bunch of people. And I just kept saying to my team, I was like, guys, I think I just want to do it with you guys. Like, yeah, we might not have as many people or maybe not have as many actors, but I'd rather deal with that rather than bring in 20 people I don't know and spend 8 hours of the 48 hours trying to figure out who these people are and figure out how to work together.
Right, right. So, yeah, yeah, because it sounds like and I'm going to paraphrase Pete Townsend from the Who. It becomes a marriage of some sorts because you guys are together all the time. You guys work together on all these different projects, and there's this trust that's built over time
Oh
to
yeah.
where to where it feels a little bit alien if you're working with someone else, because then you're like, "Uh, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm cheating here.
Yeah.
I've got this person as my DP when it should be my guy who I've worked with for the past 3 years. You know.
Yeah, and it's strange because like you do need to take those leaps. Like obviously, like you're not always going to be able to work with the same DP. So like it's important that you are able to like go on that quote unquote first date with that DP and see if you guys link up, because then it could be the start of another beautiful relationship where you guys make great movies together. But it's scary, just like going on a date, right? It's like, am I going to click with this person? There's a million reasons why this might not work, but I don't know. You got to do it because it's like, yeah. I want to work with Roger Deakins on every single movie I ever do, but guess what? It's not going to be able to happen. I'm going to have
Yeah.
to like go out and find different DPs. So that's the way it is. And I have to be adaptable. If I'm not adaptable anyway, I'm a bad director. So
Right. Yeah. No, I totally get that because because of the fact that DPs are going to go where the work is, and if there's no work available here, then they're going to go where another director's got something for them to do. So
yeah.
that makes sense. So walk me through the process. How do you go about shopping the script about? Like, how do you go about getting people interested in I guess financing your project? How does that work?
Financing is just the worst. I mean, there's no way around it, dude. It sucks. Like, it's oftentimes short films, especially, I will just do them myself. Like, I'll finance them myself because I have a lot of the equipment, so it's not nearly as hard. Um, Features, it's horrible. I mean, there's really no way around it. I think there's a lot of videos online that try to act like there's a specific way to do it, and there's really not. Like, there's principles that you can use as far as trying to get investors on board and all this stuff, but dude, it's who you know, and it's appearing professional, and it's having a good I think a good library of work that people can look at to say, hey, this is um oh, this guy actually somewhat knows what he's doing. I'd be comfortable giving him $10,000 for his feature or whatever. So the way I try to do it is try to go to people I know first, who I know trust me as a filmmaker and I want to make sure that they feel like they're going to get a return on their money.
Hmm.
Um, because at this point, going to studios is it's nearly impossible. I mean, I've done all that. I have cold called. I have literally gone down the list of IMDb and just tried to get an agent or a manager, because without an agent or a manager, you're already kind of you're playing with both hands tied behind your back. And even that, it's kind of that thing where it's like you need to have a manager to make a movie, but you kind of have to have had made a movie to get a manager. So the whole thing is terrible, and I would recommend to people, make as much as you can without trying to finance things too much. And then once you've built up a nice little library of good stuff that you think is actually good, it'll be a lot easier to get people to commit to your next project.
So what do these investors look for in terms of filmmaking? Because I get the idea that they want a return on their investment, but is there like a criteria or some sort of guidelines or anything in particular that would stand out to them when you're pitching this idea?
So I've learned, and I'm no expert on this because it's not like I've raised $50 million for my own features, but I've learned that it's really important. Every investor has had someone come to them and say, hey man, I got this new idea and I'm just so passionate about it. Like, I'm the most passionate guy you're going to find, and I'm going to work till I drop, man. And that's great. You need those things. You need to be passionate. But I think a lot of investors want to know that you also respect their money, and you know that money is not just something to be given to somebody for no reason. So I think there's a level of business acumen that you need to have, where when you talk to an investor, they recognize that you're not just some passionate artist. You're someone who also understands that movies cost a lot of money and that you need to be very careful with the money. It's not just something to be thrown at the screen nonchalantly. I was a 401k administrator for a little bit before I moved to North Carolina, and that's helped me kind of bridge that gap where I can talk to these investors in a way that I sound a little less like a filmmaker and a little more like a businessman. As much as I
Hmm.
hate wearing that hat, I kind of despise having to deal with any of that stuff.
I mean, you kind of
Um,
have to.
you have to. There's no way around it. Like, until I have my own manager and agent who can kind of bridge that gap, I really have to be able to have those conversations with people and let them know that, hey, I'm not, because everyone just thinks, oh, everyone's making movies, with their phones and nobody cares. And it's just this artistic thing. Why would I give money to it? And you have to let them know, like, hey, man, I've worked on this script for a while. I've thought about how to make it as inexpensively as possible without compromising it so it's still good. These are the audience, this is the target audiences that I think are really going to enjoy it. Here's my plan for once it's done, for getting distribution and doing festival runs and things. Like, you show them a nice pitch deck, and it's a lot easier. They still might not bite, obviously it still might be a super uphill battle, but at least you show them that, hey, all these questions you have, I've already thought of them. Here are the answers.
So what advice would you give to an upcoming filmmaker who's trying to get his foot in the door? Like what would you say is the most important thing to do in terms of getting that meeting, or getting that first, I guess now everything's done online, that first Zoom meeting with with an investor? What would be the number one advice you would give?
So before I would give any advice on getting the first meeting, so to speak, I would say that if you're not willing to hear no for 10 plus years, maybe more, 20 years, if you don't love it that much, then you should choose something else, at least professionally. Like, you could still make movies, but maybe it's not going to make money for you. I'm not trying to discourage people from doing that. I just think people need to understand how insanely demoralizing it can be at times when every single person is saying no to you and no one gives a crap about your script and nobody wants to give you money, let alone even watch your thing once it's done. And if you don't love it enough to just take that on the chin and keep making movies anyway, you're gonna get buried, and it's gonna be a miserable experience. So before you even try to get that first meeting, sit with yourself in a room and decide if that's really something that you're ready for, because it is not going to come easily. It's one in a million, David F. Sandbergs who make the Lights Out short film, and then it just blows up, and he gets to make a feature length version of it, and then gets to make Shazam and all these other movies. Like, that is one in a trillion. So that's the first thing I would say, which is kind of a depressing caveat to that, whatever you say that word. But then once I would say that, then it's just, I would focus on, again, making a really good library of work. So let people look back and see he's made this many short films. Oh, they're all good. He's clearly got talent here. He's getting better with each one. And then usually, have a product in terms of, like, have a script that you really believe in. Focus on your experience, not just how passionate you are about this script, because remember, these cats get a million scripts to them sent every single day, and every script that's sent to them is quote unquote the best script ever. Like, your script isn't the best thing ever. It might be really good, but, like, that can't be your focus, because they've heard that all before. You need to show yourself as someone who understands the business side of filmmaking, because that's essentially what you're asking is, hey, can you fund my movie? Can you help me get with a studio? Can you pay for this dream of mine? So you don't want to seem nonchalant about them giving that responsibility, or them paying for that. So I think, have a really professional resume, have a really good body of work,
Mhm.
and then do your best to make relationships with people in a way that's not skeevy, and that horrible networking kind of thing that everyone does, where all you're doing, you're having a conversation with the person, and you can tell that all it is, hey, what can you give me, and what can you give me? And it's just gross, and I just hate that. So try to actually establish genuine relationships. The other thing I would say is, every project you work on, do your absolute best. And that seems like an obvious thing, but, like, you'd be surprised, I think, how many projects I've worked on that I thought, like, oh, this isn't going to be the biggest deal ever. Maybe the script isn't great, but I'm doing it anyway, and I'm just going to do my best. And I just show up and I try my hardest. And then the people that I worked with, they see that and they remember that. And then they contact me later, and that opens up all these doors. So, like, big or small, no matter what you think of it, if you agreed to direct it or to act in it or whatever, make everyone amazed at how hard you try and how ridiculously prepared you are. At least they should leave that set being like, man, he is on the ball. And that can go a long way. I mean, that's what's gotten me a lot of work, is just trying to really, really do my best. And then people, I think, remember that, if you're lucky.
Gotcha. So really, so really, it just boils down to, try to make friends with everybody.
Yeah, I think so. I'm also, I think it's really important to be honest. Like, there's not a ton of there's a lot of flattery and a lot of, like I said, you're just trying to kind of get something from everybody. So everyone is kind of there can be a lot of fake attitudes that happen in any industry, not just the filmmaking industry. But so I try to be very honest. Like if I work with someone and they were, um, let's take talent out of the equation, right? Let's not even consider their talent. Let's just talk about like maybe they were an hour late to set and they had a really bad attitude with everybody and they made some people feel uncomfortable. I have no problem being like, hey man, I don't think that these were issues that I had. And that's just not the kind of set that I want to work on. It's not the kind of people that I want to work with. If those are things that you can fix and manage in the future, I'd love to have the conversation. But I have no problem telling people, that there's things I don't accept on a set, especially as the director. Like I need to lead, and if someone is doing something that's making people uncomfortable or making people feel too much pressure, it's my job to remedy that. And that burns some bridges sometimes, but I'm okay. Like I trust that as long as I'm being honest and speaking truthfully with love and not just trying to be a jerk to everybody,
Mhm.
then that's okay. Some relationships end up having to be lost, but then I think people ultimately respect your honesty. They respect that you're not someone who just says what everyone wants to hear.
Gotcha, gotcha. So, so once you so once you've gotten the financial backing, what does production look like for you? Do you usually like work within a certain number of days, or does it just last for however long it needs to last? What does that look like here?
Well, it'll depend on the budget. So like a lot of short films, it can be whatever. Like especially if it's just a short film with your buddies, whatever, like whatever you
Hmm.
need to do it. If you're not renting a location, it's at your house, like just do it in the time that you need to do it. Um, but yeah, on a feature, yeah, it's a whole different ballgame because you're paying everybody and you're renting out locations and everything. So it's gonna depend. The feature I did in Charlotte, I think was a 3-week shoot. And that schedule was insane. We were shooting like 10, 15 scenes a day, which is ridiculous, like absolutely
Right.
insane. We somehow made it work, but yeah, it's absolutely crazy. But then you get other stuff that the feature I'm doing in Austin, not Austin, in Texas, um, is supposed to be a 90-day shoot. So that's a lot different. So it's usually really dependent on the budget. But I'd say if you're doing short films, if you're just starting out, try to set yourself up for success and give yourself as much time as possible. But then also, once you think you're ready, it's good to give yourself some time limits because obviously filmmaking is you're always behind schedule. So it's good to be like, hey guys, we're gonna make this weekend, and that's the time that we have to make it. And you put limits on yourself when you're ready.
Right, right. Well, I feel like I also feel like too with short films, you try not to do too much because I feel because like you mentioned earlier, I mean, it's pretty easy to try to cram all these different ideas and different concepts into a short film, and then it just implodes in your face. So I figured, if you're doing something as simple as a short film, I mean, you want to keep it as simple as possible, just so everybody's on the same page, and just so it's more manageable and you get it done in a more timely manner. You know?
Yeah, and I think just from an emotional standpoint, like people they can't follow 50 things in 10 minutes. Like make it about something that people can latch onto in that short little 10-minute span. Um because if you don't do that, I just think sometimes the simplest answer is the best answer, right? And it like if it's a
Yeah.
story, if it's a father and son story, make it a father and son story. Don't make it a father and son, but the father has to leave to go here, and the son has this girlfriend, and the mother is mad about like I don't know. It gets very messy, and I think a lot of like really be an essentialist. I think a lot of the time, like, hey, do we need this character? Like, do we really need them for the emotion of this scene, for the emotion of this short film? Because if you don't need them, cut it, get it out of there. Like, make the emotion the primary force of what you're doing. Because other than that, like, people will forget how your movie was. They'll even forget how your movie was shot. Like those things are incredibly important, and I'm not downplaying that at all. I love the technical aspect of filmmaking,
Yeah.
but what makes people remember stuff is that it actually made them feel something. And if you don't have that, then it doesn't matter how beautiful your film looks. It doesn't matter how good it sounds. People, they won't care. Like there's, that's the main thing, at least for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, because you want it to be simple enough that the audience can follow and connect with it, you know.
Yeah, and like emotions are seldom very simple anyway. So if it's like again, if it's a father-son relationship, yeah, it sounds simple when I say it like that, but that could be so layered that you don't need to add anything else because that is a complex relationship at its core. You know what I mean? So it's like
Yeah.
if you add anything else, it might be at the everything is at the expense of something. So like adding a third character maybe you can't flesh out the father son dynamic as much anymore because you have to flesh out that third character. So really, really look hard at scripts, I think, and be like, which do we need this guy here? Like, do we really need that character to come in, or can we get it done with our two main characters and give them more development and make people really feel for them?
Yeah, because I've seen some movies and TV shows where sometimes it's just the one character, but it works because they carry the entire narrative by themselves, and it's better for it. Whereas there are some examples of films where there have been too many characters, and you're just like, I don't know who any of these people are, what they do.
Yeah.
Like The Witcher, for instance. My friend and I, we've discussed The Witcher on numerous occasions, and we both came to the same conclusion. There's just too many people doing too many things, and we have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Witcher. I heard the first season was really good, and then I heard all this stuff about the like second and third season or whatever. Just seemed like it was just I don't know, like it seemed like one of those productions that was crazy and like was getting a bunch of interference and stuff. So I like never got to watching it, but I'm curious because it Henry Cavill is really good, so I'm interested.
I mean, he's a good actor, but the reason why I'm bringing that up is because it perfectly illustrates your point where
Yeah,
if you add in a third character, a fourth character, a 20th character, all of a sudden the story is no longer about a father and son. Now you've got to involve the 20th character's story because you have to accommodate them in order to justify having the actor on set to to do their bit as well.
yeah,
I totally agree with you because because from an audience standpoint, you want the story to be as simple as possible because at least then you're able to follow and you can have this connection with the person. If you throw in the mother's cousin twice removed who is a notary, for instance, now you're just sitting there like, what the hell is this guy doing? It
yeah,
totally took me out of the moment. And now I have
yeah.
to follow his story of, oh, he's trying to woo this girl that he met at a bar. Well, what the hell does this have to do with the main story
Right,
here?
totally. Do you what's a movie that you think does like kind of a good job at that, like being very really focused?
Um, the first movie that comes to mind is Kramer versus Kramer,
Oh, okay.
because 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 yeah, I mean, you do have some characters in the background, but the main focus is between Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman as they're going through this divorce process and trying to figure out how they're going to raise a kid while they're separated.
Yeah.
And for me, when I was watching that movie, I never lost focus on the drama that's going on between them because there weren't that many ancillary storylines in the background. It was just about these two people. To use a TV reference, I recently watched an episode of Doctor Who, called I think it was called Heaven Sent. It was from a few years back, and it was literally just the Doctor in a castle trying to come to terms with the death of his companion. And you see him go through all of these emotions, and I'm watching this episode. I'm thinking, wow, this is a very, very powerful episode because this time traveling alien who can regenerate his body and essentially live forever, he's having to come to terms with the death of a friend of his, and he's literally in a nightmare of his own making because we come to find out that the castle is in the middle of a sea, and it represents his own personal hell, and he's being stalked by this deathly figure that is basically a specter from his past.
Hmm.
So I think I think it can be done. I think the fear with that kind of narrative is that people people start off saying, "Oh yeah, it's a pretty good idea. I think it's got a lot of potential," but then they kind of balk at the last minute. They're like, "Well, what if it? What if people don't really care about that? Maybe I should throw in this person here to kind of like liven things up a bit."
Oh, I
And
see
it
what you mean.
and it becomes this huge pit because then because once you've opened that door, I mean, where does it stop? Because now people because more ideas, more concepts come in, because then you start to justify, well, if I had this person in here, I mean, yeah, I mean, we could have this story about a father and son, but maybe if we add a little element here that the son is gay, maybe that might, maybe that might accommodate or
Yeah.
appeal to people from the LGBT community who would find the story appealing. And
Yeah, and
and from my standpoint, it's not. I mean, if it's not conducive to the storyline, don't have it in there. That's my feeling.
yeah, I mean, I think because there's definitely merit to like, hey, is this part of the story? Can we include this because it will hit harder with a certain group of people, or it will just hit harder in general, right? But yeah, I think it's about knowing that your prime directive, knowing that like what the story is at its core is strong enough to sustain itself. And if it's not, then maybe it shouldn't be, a story. Like if the story at its core is not enough that you have to add a bunch of things to make people because you're afraid that they won't care enough about that main thing,
Hmm.
then I think you got to go back to the drawing board a little bit. I think a great example is one of my favorite movies to come out recently, Blade Runner 2049, um, because I think that's a story that is it's in this crazy futuristic world. It's got all this amazing technology and beautiful cinematography and all this stuff, but really, it's just about a character's identity. That's like all it is. It's really focused in on that thing. And there's side stuff, sure, but it never loses track of like Ryan Gosling's character and what he is trying to discover about himself. Like that's it. And I love that a movie can be that big, but also that emotionally poignant too at the same time.
Right, right. Because right, because it appeals to something that we all have to struggle with. So regardless of who you are, everybody understands. Oh, I know exactly how that feels. You
Yeah,
know.
even if you're in the future, or some crazy science fiction world.
Right, right. So I want to move forward. So once you shot the movie and everything is in the can, what does post production look like? Do you normally do it yourself, or do you hire someone to do it, or do you take it to a studio, or what?
It'll depend on short films. I like to cut it myself, but that's kind of just because again, at this level, it's hard to find people who you feel like are really have the same mentality as you about things and have the same instincts. And sometimes it's just faster and easier to do it yourself because it's only like a 7-minute short film. So cutting it doesn't have to be a insane, month long endeavor. Um, but if it was a feature, then yeah, I'm going to work with an editor and I'm going to be in the room, when they're cutting it, and we're going to be having that conversation. Because I think that at least that's you asked about post production. I think that's one of the most important parts of post production. Obviously, is the cutting of the film. Because I think the edit of a scene is so it decides the tone, it decides the pace of the scene. It's everything, it's that's I mean, I love film because everything is kind of everything, right? Like the performance is
Yeah.
everything, the cinematography is everything, but like the editing really like a great scene can be ruined or made by good or bad editing. So I like to be in the room with the editor. I like us to be having discussions about the pace of the scene and the cut and what we're trying to accomplish there because there's a lot of people who just they see it like, all right, I shot the movie, and now I'm going to send it off to a guy and he's going to cut the movie. And then we'll send it off to another guy and he'll color the movie. And then it just feels like 10 different people made the movie. So I like to be there at kind of all the stages, not micromanaging, just making sure that we're having a consistent vision.
You're guiding the process.
Yeah, guiding's a more flattering word on what I'm doing. Yeah. I think I'm just being there and hopefully I've chosen an editor that I chose him because he has a similar mentality as me, you know? So hopefully we're already close to being there. That's why I decided to work with him. But then, yeah, every scene, it's like you might, you know, maybe the editor just has a different take. And then also you get that because, like, cool, maybe he did a cut that you did not think you were going to do, but he did it. And now you're like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about the scene that way. And now,
Hmm.
you know, just like an actor brings ideas, an editor is going to bring ideas too. People look at that job like it's a really like mathematically precise job. And sometimes it is, but it's also a very artistic thing. Like how to cut a scene is just as much an artistic choice as where to put the camera.
So, so this leads me to my next question. Has there ever been a situation where you've gone through the editing process and you thought to yourself, do I need to reshoot this particular scene? Like, has that ever come up?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um it comes up every time and I think it always will. Um Part of that is when you're cutting something, you have to get used to the cut in terms of like you're just not used to seeing shots cut together. So sometimes that tells you that it's a bad cut and it might not be, you know. So at the beginning you kind of have to just get used to what it looks like to smash these two videos together and, you know, make it blend and make it work. But then yeah, there are other times when you didn't plan properly and you didn't storyboard properly and you thought these two shots were going to cut nicely and they do not work at all. Like it's a jump cut or it's a weird angle or it just doesn't feel right and you didn't think about it. So you either have to eat it, do something else or go back and reshoot. And I've had all those things happen to me. You know, I've gone back and reshot scenes because I did it wrong. I have changed scenes in the edit because I made a mistake and it wasn't going to work the way I thought it was going to. But as I've learned, and the more I learn, the better I get. Uh, that happens less and less because the more you start to kind of, I think, speak that visual language where you know if shots are going to cut together well just by
Right.
looking at them. You have that thing in your head that's telling you, hey, this is going to work. And I think the more you do it, the more accurate that gets. But I don't think there will ever be a project I work on where I edit it and I'm like, yes, this is exactly perfectly what I thought it was going to be. Like, just it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I get you. It's kind of, and I've heard some people tell me that you kind of develop a sixth sense, over time about what's going to work and what's not going to work. Um, I don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. I think I describe it. It sounds pretentious, but I always describe it as like speaking the visual language. Like if you speak English, you know how to form a sentence. You know how to form a sentence that's going to convey the meaning that you want to be conveyed, and you know how to do that. And I think when you're making a movie, you're doing the same thing, but you're just doing it visually. You're like, hey, I want people to feel unsettled by this scene. So I have to speak enough, I have to have enough visual vocabulary to be able to convey that. And also, I have to be skillful enough at it that I don't fumble over myself and make shots that don't serve that and they don't cut together. And then you run into a whole host of other problems. And I think that just comes with time and a lot of research and watching movies, you know?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, just piggybacking off that analogy. I mean, at the very basic level, when you speak a language, I mean, the first thing you do is you would need to learn like how to put words together to create a sense and how to convey concepts. But over time, you kind of develop this ability to anticipate what's going to happen next.
Mm.
So like if you're in a situation where someone comes in, you can sort of anticipate, oh, it's very important news based on their expression or based on context. Oh, they're going to announce that they're getting divorced. Would you say that's sort of similar when speaking the visual language? You can sort of anticipate what might work or what might not work.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's how that um it comes about through a lot of time and like I said, a lot of watching movies. I think a really good example of that is something like as simple as focal lengths and what lens you use.
Hmm.
Because I'll watch movies with my girlfriend and I love watching movies with people who don't study filmmaking at all. I also love watching it with nerds like myself because that's fun too. But watching it with people who don't know anything about it, there'll be some shot and it's on like a really long lens. and the person next to me will be like, oh, like this is creepy, or they'll have that feeling that someone's watching that person, or that it's a from a distance away. And it's this psychological effect that a lens choice is having on a person who doesn't know anything about lenses, but we have this built-in thing in our head. So it's like if you learn to speak that, you can tap into that, and then you can be like, hey, I'm choosing this lens because I know it'll make people feel this way. And it's
Right,
more about,
you're anticipating the reaction,
yeah,
as it
it's more
were.
about the feeling, less about like, I think we need to be on a 12 millimeter here because I really want to show, the vastness of that's important too. Like that is a thing, but I more choose those things on feeling. Like, hey, I'm gonna shoot this on a 35, not a 65, because I want us to actually feel closer. I want the camera to physically be closer to my subject because I know that people will subconsciously feel that. They won't say it. People won't be like, oh yeah, I feel so close to him because the camera's close, but they'll subconsciously know that. And I think that's a thing that you start to learn. I mean, I'm still learning every day with this stuff, but like you start to learn that the more you do it, that you can make people feel a certain way and they won't know why, but you did it anyway. It's like a magic trick.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, filmmaking is magic in a way. It's wizardry, because
Right.
because not only are you taking these abstract concepts and trying to make them visual, but you're also working with individuals, with people who know how to create this technical experience that speaks to people. Um,
Yeah.
I want to I want to ask you, how exactly did you get into filmmaking? Because you said you worked as a 401k admin before. What fueled your passion to decide, you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and make movies, as a career?
So I was doing, even as I was working in that industry for just a little bit, I was making music a lot. That's what I started out doing. I thought my path was gonna be making music professionally, my own original music, and I did that. I still do that today, but I thought that was gonna be the path. But I always also loved movies, like to an insane degree. So it was always kind of both those things at the same time. Like movies and music were like my two great loves. Um, and that's why like Lord of the Rings was just pivotal in my upbringing. Like my parents letting me watch Lord of the Rings was like, oh my gosh, it's a great movie and it's the best soundtrack that's ever been put in a movie in one. And I was just loving every second of it. Um, so I think that was a big part of it when I was doing 401 when I was working with 401ks in Ohio. I don't know, I would have made a lot more money doing it, but I just knew that it was not gonna I was not gonna be fulfilled by that. Like it was not, I don't know. I felt too drawn to the artistic stuff, and I guess the way that I felt like I knew that that was valid was because again, I would have made so much more money if I hadn't done that. So like I explicitly chose the less beneficial of two options because it just felt like I was supposed to make music. And then as I was making music, I started making music videos for my songs. And then I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe I can actually make, you know, this stuff." And then I made a short film, and then I went from there. And over the years, it's just kind of become clear to me that music is still one of my biggest passions, but maybe it's more of a passion. And filmmaking is a passion that I can actually turn into more of a career. Um, so yeah.
So, did you go to school, or did you learn all this by doing it?
No, man, University YouTube, classic. There's no no official schooling for filmmaking at all. Just
In spite of what the websites will tell you, right?
it's dude, it's I have a buddy that I live with who works on films too, and he always tells me, he's like, dude, I regret going to college for this stuff because I've learned more in our conversations, in just us talking and watching movies together than college. Because it's just, I think you go to school and you get told to learn something, and that's not how we learn. We learn when we seek out something to learn because we're interested in it. So plus, like, I love watching movies. So I literally get to have the best class ever where I sit there and I get to watch a movie, but I also get to look at it critically and be like, ooh, why did that scene work so well? All right, let me hit rewind. And then I'll watch it differently and be like, oh, it's because they used that shot, or they cut this way, or it's because, you know what I mean? And so every movie is like a whole freaking course in of itself. So it's just, I mean, going to school is valuable. Obviously, I think people will learn a lot, but you definitely don't need to. You could, if you're passionate enough and you're committed enough to seek out the knowledge, it's out there. The internet is a thing. Like there's a million filmmaking channels on YouTube that will teach you so much. And then you can just watch movies and learn that way. I mean, and then also you're going to be less of a robot, I think. Because if you go to, not that everyone who goes to school for film is a robot, but I think when you just get inundated with nothing but like, this is what you should do, and this is the rule of thirds, and this is why you don't break the 180 rule. It's like, okay, but I think the most interesting moments are when filmmakers say, hey, I'm gonna actually go against that rule for a second, and it's gonna become really powerful because I am breaking that rule. I'm bending that rule, So I think it's anyone can learn anything these days.
Yeah, and actually, it calls to mind a quote that Terry Gilliam, from Monty Python said, because he didn't go to school for filmmaking. He actually studied political science, and he said, and again I'm paraphrasing, he said, if I'd gone to school for filmmaking, I wouldn't have learned anything. It's better to go to school and study a subject that you can have a conversation about, and then you can learn the filmmaking process, on your own. Obviously he started off doing cutout animations, and then eventually he graduated to doing Holy Grail, and
Yeah.
well, you know the rest of the story.
Right.
So that totally fits in with what you're saying right there.
Yeah.
So so I do want to be respectful of your time, but I do want to ask, is there a particular movie or TV show that you're watching right now that you're thinking, wow, this is really, really good, and I would recommend it for everybody to watch?
Ooh, oh, that's hard. Because I'm one of those people that is always watching like 12 movies at once. Like I'm like halfway through 6 movies, and I'm rewatching scenes from No Country for Old Men 50 times, like all the time. So so that's really hard. I guess something I am like skimming through and rewatching right now is some House of Cards on Netflix.
Is it the British version or the American one?
Oh my gosh, there's a British version?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so the one with Kevin Spacey is actually an adaptation of the British one that was from the 1980s. So
Dang.
so usually when it comes to shows like that, I always do my research first to see if it was based on an original, and then from there I'll watch the original first. It's kind of like when I was a kid, my dad and I used to watch Sanford and Sons, and then I found out it was based on a BBC show called Steptoe and Son. So I watched that, and I was like, this is actually pretty legit. I could see why they adapted it, for American audiences.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea that was adapted from anything. Wow, that's really interesting. Now I'm curious what the similarities and differences are.
Yeah, and I will say the British version, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a bit more, I guess, harsh, just because of the fact that it takes place in the UK Parliament, and and obviously the parliamentary system operates a whole lot differently from the American political system. But
Yeah.
it's more cutthroat, shall we say? It's like,
Wow.
It's like if you watch Veep, it's like, okay, this is a pretty good satire of of the political landscape. But then if you watch the BBC show that was based on In the Loop, it's like, wow, this is cutthroat. Like everybody's at each other's throats and trying to get ahead in politics. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely recommend you watching the BBC version of House of Cards.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'll have to check that out. Because I'm like skimming. I'm pretty much watching all the Kevin Spacey scenes, because like when he's not on screen, it's not good. It's just he's so good in that show that it's like every single scene he's in, I just watch that. So I've been kind of interested in that show. I really like Fincher directed a lot of episodes at the beginning of it. And it's just I don't know. It's very interesting to see a character like Frank Underwood be so cold and calculating, and have it be so fun to watch. Like that's just an interesting observation of of humans, I think, to just why am I rooting for this guy? But I'm rooting for him all the way, and he's a terrible person. Like, but
Right.
that's the magic of the show is it does that, and it's so cold, but I don't know, that's kind of how politics seem to be, and it's kind of how it maybe has to be. Like I don't know that you could be the president without having a level of like disconnection from humanity, because it's such a crazy job to have. It's also kind of sad, like you watch that show and you see the kind of things that Frank Underwood has to do as president, like the like insane intelligence he has to have and psychological manipulation for his enemies, and you're like, I don't know that like we've ever had a president that I felt was like super strong about doing any of that stuff. I'm like, this is like it's basically a celebrity contest nowadays, so I'm like I feel really bad about like I don't know that we've had presidents who are like that sharp, like at least in the past like 5 years or something. It's like
I mean,
crazy.
I mean, the closest will probably be Nixon, but even then, Frank Underwood, makes Nixon look like, the friendly
Yeah.
neighborhood ice cream guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you look at like the crazy, like obviously like ever since like the Trump era and then leading into Biden, it's been like a big like MTV show basically, because it's just like insanity what's going on. But
Yeah.
like it's wild because like Biden has like, and I'm not making political statements, but it's like if the president has trouble like finishing certain sentences and like remembering names, and like I'm like Frank Underwood has to like keep a trillion things in his head at once, and it makes me like worried. I'm like, is this actually what the president has to be able to do? Because if that's the case, I'm kind of concerned about like not just Biden, but like presidents in general. Like how can anyone do a good job?
I mean, at this point, we're reliving the Ford presidency. That's what I keep telling people.
Mm.
Ford was a bumbling guy. I mean, we got Ford 2.0. I'm just worried about what happens when we like someone like Kanye into the White House.
No, I don't think there's a. That would be hilarious, but also like that's the other thing. People freak out about who's president, and like, yeah, we should care, but also, I mean, the president has a cabinet for a reason. It's a lot like directing, I think, in terms of like you can be as involved or as not involved as you want as a director. Like I know a lot about editing, shooting, coloring, all that stuff. I don't have to know about those things. Does it make me a better director? Yeah, but I actually surround myself with a team and they're all experts at those individual things. So it helps me and I just guide everyone. That being said, it'd be nice to have a president who's like, I'm an expert on all those things too, because that can't hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap things up, where can how can people find out about your work? Where can they, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Well, the best way to reach out to me would probably be through my email, which is just jacquinstudios@gmail.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the
Um,
description below too. So if
Awesome.
anybody
Yeah.
wants to reach out to you, they can.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me if you want someone to direct your script, or take a look at your script, or DP, or I do a bunch of things. As far as seeing my work and seeing what I've done, like I said, there's a lot of stuff right now that isn't released because it's in film festivals. But I have some stuff like on my YouTube channel. If you just searched my name, you'd see my YouTube channel with short films and video essays on filmmaking and stuff like that. Yeah, that'd probably be the best way. Or always, IMDb and that kind of stuff. All my info's there as well.
Yeah, send me those links, and I'll put them in the description below.
Yeah, I
Just so
will.
if anybody's interested, they can reach out to you directly. But yeah, Brady, I just want to thank you so much for appearing on the show today.
Yeah, man.
And I would love to have you come back on for future episodes. So so I definitely do I definitely do enjoy talking to you. I definitely enjoy talking to people about the filmmaking process, and I hope this is the beginning of to use a quote here, I hope this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship.
No, I dude, absolutely, and I really appreciate you having me on, man. This has been great. Are you excited to kind of to reach out to more filmmakers and have those? I know you told me about some other kind of different segments you were gonna have. Are you excited
Yeah.
about those?
Oh yeah. I mean, sometimes I won't sleep. I won't sleep the entire night just because I'm just anticipating these conversations.
Mm,
I and I actually put out the word on Facebook just a couple of weeks ago, and I've gotten a pretty good response.
Nice.
I know next week I've got the organizer for the Alexandria Film Festival. She's coming on. And then in October, one of the organizers for the Queer Fear Film Festival, I think that's up in Winston. She's gonna make an appearance. And then I already mentioned I've got a few a few guests from the UK coming on, and I think I've got one guest from New York City. He's going to appear in December, and then I have the director of a theater company. Who's actually friends with a coworker of mine. He's going to appear sometime in October to discuss all that. So
Yeah.
and what I also like to do, and I used to do this a lot when I was in school because I used to work for the college TV station. So I used to do what I'm doing right now, just reach out to people and connecting people. I would love to connect you with all my guests. So if there's anybody you want to work with, or if you're looking for actors, you can reach out to them and say, hey, you were on the Movie Pope podcast. You were talking about this and that. I definitely want to, reach out to you and see if you'd be interested in doing this.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man, and good for you, dude. It's awesome that you have so many people already coming on. That's great, man.
I was shocked. I was shocked by all of that. But
yeah.
But yeah,
are you considering adding video to it at some point? Have you thought about that at all, or do you want to keep it purely audio?
So right now the way that it works is I usually record the audio, and then because I'm ironic, because why not? I like to put video of just random things like snails and pyramids and stuff on top with a drawing of me and my friends sitting in armchairs going through like these weird backgrounds. Because
all right.
Because usually when I'm listening to a podcast, I don't really watch the videos. I just listen to the audio.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah. Sweet.
So
where are you? I guess you don't have to answer this, but where are you located? Are you near me, or are you?
I'm in Charlotte, so I'm near.
Cool.
I'm a 51 near Ballantyne. Where are you?
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm over closer to like the Gastonia side of things.
Okay, gotcha.
Nice, man.
Gotcha.
Well, that's awesome, dude. Well, you can. Hopefully, we will have more conversations and figure stuff out as this continues. It's cool that you have so many people coming on.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I actually started this channel, the Bushwhackers channel, back in August, and I completed season 1 of the Bushwhackers, and I'm getting ready to release season 2, probably within the next few weeks or next month. So I'll send you the links. Definitely check out some of this stuff. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, I'm sure I will.
Excellent. Well, I just want to thank everybody today for tuning in and listening to our very first interview ever on the Movie Pope podcast. And if you are interested in appearing on the show yourself, feel free to shoot me an email at thenonsequitur87@gmail.com. And as always, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let's try to get to 50, at least 50 subscribers. If we can get to 50 subscribers, I will do a dance. I did it once and I didn't break a bone, so I will do it again. And next week, his Moviness will return, where we will be reviewing Secret Invasion. So remember to subscribe to stay up to date for the latest episodes. And thank you so much for watching. Take it easy. All right.